Restricted area introduced, 2012. A seemingly small semicircle forever changed how the WNBA protected its players. In 2012, the league introduced the restricted area arc under the basket, a rule designed to reduce dangerous collisions under the rim. It was a direct response to increased concerns about player safety, especially when it came to slashers barreling toward the paint. Before the arc existed, defenders could plant directly under the rim and draw offensive fouls, even as airborne players crashed into them mid-layup. This was particularly risky for explosive guards like Simone Augustus or Cappie Pondexter, who made a living attacking the hoop. One misstep, or one defender too close, could result in awkward landings and serious injuries. By implementing the restricted area, the league essentially gave drivers space to land. If a defender was standing inside the arc and made contact, the foul was now defensive by default. It also encouraged cleaner rotations and vertical contests rather than stepping under a player late. Though borrowed from the NBA and NCAA, the WNBA's adoption of the arc marked a turning point in modernizing its rulebook and prioritizing player health. It also subtly shifted defensive strategy. No longer could savvy veterans like Tamika Catchings bait charges under the rim. They had to rely on footwork, timing, and position outside the paint. The impact? Fewer stoppages, fewer dangerous mid-air collisions, and a better offensive rhythm. Today, it's hard to imagine the league without it. What once seemed like a minor tweak quickly became a critical part of WNBA paint battles. Coach's Challenge introduced 2020. For years, players and coaches begged for it, and finally, in 2020, they got it. The WNBA introduced the Coach's Challenge, giving teams a single opportunity per game to dispute a call. Whether it was a questionable foul, a missed out-of-bounds decision, or a blown goaltending ruling, coaches finally had a lifeline. This rule wasn't born in a vacuum. It grew out of rising frustrations, especially in high-stakes moments. Think back to the 2019 finals between the Washington Mystics and Connecticut Sun. Blown calls and late whistles fueled online debates, and players like Elena Delle Donne and Jonquel Jones voiced concerns about the need for accountability and accuracy. The rule change gave teams one challenge per game, and if successful, they kept it. It required the use of a timeout and triggered instant replay. For players, it meant fairness. For fans, it added drama. And for refs, it was a second chance to get it right. Some moments have already defined the challenge era. A pivotal block charge call reversed in favor of Breanna Stewart. A game-winning shot upheld for Skylar Diggins-Smith after a contested buzzer beater. The challenge brought transparency, and with it, another layer of strategy. While still evolving, this rule marked a key shift in the league's relationship with technology and officiating. It wasn't just about preventing errors. It was about empowering teams with control. And in a league where every possession matters, that control can change everything. Defensive 3-second violation enforcement 2023. In 2023, the WNBA finally cracked down on something that had quietly disrupted flow and fairness for years: illegal paint camping. Defensive 3-second violations, long part of the rulebook, were now being enforced with greater consistency. Why? Because dominant bigs were turning the paint into a no-fly zone. Players like Sylvia Fowles and Liz Cambage had already changed how teams approached interior defense. With their size, strength, and footwork, they could seal off lanes without even fouling. But too often, defenders were simply parking in the paint for entire possessions, slowing drives, clogging spacing, and making life impossible for smaller guards. By tightening enforcement, referees started actively whistling those violations, awarding a technical free throw and possession to the offense. It was a message: move your feet, play smart, and don't just plant under the basket. This rule balanced the scales, giving slashers like Arike Ogunbowale and Kelsey Plum room to work and encouraging more fluid motion. The impact was immediate. Pick and rolls had more breathing space. Offensive spacing opened up. And while rim protectors still thrived, they now had to patrol, not camp. It wasn't a total revolution, but it was a clear response to evolving game styles and player feedback. At its core, this rule reinforced one idea: the WNBA is a game of movement, not stalling. And by enforcing what was already in the books, the league ensured it stayed that way. Introduction of the defensive 3-second rule, 2002. The year was 2002, and the WNBA was entering a new phase of offensive firepower. But with that came an increasingly noticeable problem: defenders camping in the paint, shutting down any attempt at slashing or post creation. The solution? A major rule change borrowed from the NBA, the defensive 3-second violation. Prior to this shift, teams could post up bigs like Lisa Leslie or Lauren Jackson without much help defense interference. But on the flip side, teams like Detroit were beginning to stifle the paint with help defenders who would camp out, clog the lane, and slow the pace to a crawl. For slashers like Dawn Staley and guards like Sue Bird coming into the league, it created an unfair gridlock. The rule forced defenders to step out of the lane if they weren't actively guarding a player, stay in the paint too long without engaging someone, and it was an automatic technical, free throw plus possession. It reintroduced spacing and rhythm back into a league increasingly dominated by physicality. The league's decision wasn't just about offense, it was about entertainment. Stagnant paint play made the product harder to watch. The rule opened things up: more kickouts, more cuts, more mid-range looks. And most importantly, it let stars showcase their full game without being double-teamed into oblivion. Today, this rule is second nature, but back then, it was a controversial tweak that redefined how defenses approached every single possession. Three-point line extended to NBA distance, 2021. It wasn't just a matter of range, it was a matter of evolution. In 2021, the WNBA made a bold decision: extend the three-point line to match the NBA's, 22 feet in the corners and 23 feet, 9 inches up top. For a league already brimming with deep shooters, it signaled a shift towards spacing, pace, and perimeter excellence. But it wasn't just for show. The change reflected a real transformation in how players were playing the game. Sabrina Ionescu, Arike Ogunbowale, and a rising Caitlin Clark at the college level were already pulling from deep, rendering the old arc almost obsolete. The shorter distance compressed defenses and robbed guards of space. The league saw the trend and adapted. Extending the arc widened the floor and created new challenges for both ends. For sharpshooters like Kelsey Mitchell, it was an invitation. For defenses, a puzzle. Now they had to close out harder, rotate faster, and respect shooters much farther out. It also brought training regimens up to speed. Shooting coaches across the league adjusted mechanics. Strength training for long-range consistency became part of every guard's routine. In short, it made the game more modern and more punishing for those who didn't adapt. The result? Higher scoring, deeper highlights, and a league better prepared to showcase its best talent on a global stage. Clear Path Foul Rule, 2014. Before 2014, fast breaks were a gamble, not because of missed layups, but because defenders could deliberately foul to stop momentum without major consequence. That changed with the Clear Path Foul Rule. In a bid to preserve fast-paced, transition-heavy plays and protect ball handlers, the WNBA instituted stricter enforcement for clear path fouls. If a defender fouled a player with no one between them and the basket, it was now an automatic 2 free throws plus the ball. No more soft fouls or tactical hacks at half court. This rule disproportionately affected teams that relied on smart, strategic fouls to slow down scoring runs. And while it might seem like a minor tweak, it had massive impact on momentum, especially late in games. Players like Angel McCoughtry and Dewana Bonner, known for leaking out early and finishing fast breaks, benefited instantly. Suddenly, defenders had to actually defend, not just foul. It also changed coaching tactics. No longer could coaches yell "foul" after a turnover without risking a 4-point swing. And it gave offensive stars a green light to push the pace, knowing they had real protection from intentional disruptions. In the years since, the rule has helped preserve some of the most electric plays in the sport. It's part of why today's WNBA feels faster, more fluid, and way more watchable. Technical fouls for excessive taunting, 2023. The 2023 season lit a fire under WNBA rivalries, but it also lit a fuse, especially when it came to trash talk. Players like Angel Reese and Chennedy Carter brought a level of bravado the league hadn't seen in years, from finger-pointing to "you can't see me" gestures and viral post-game interviews that spilled onto social media. But the moment things started escalating into shoves, stares, and almost brawls, the league stepped in. Mid-season, the WNBA quietly issued internal memos warning teams about excessive taunting and unsportsmanlike gestures. The message was clear: trash talk is fine, until it starts inciting the crowd or crossing personal boundaries. Technical fouls began to rise for on-court antics. Players were stunned. What used to be celebrated flair was now being called out by referees. The change was controversial. Fans loved the fire. TikTok clips of post-bucket gestures racked up millions of views. But the league, balancing growth with image, feared viral moments could backfire if things boiled over. The straw that broke it? The Clark vs. Reese incident in the 2025 season opener, where hard contact and chest-to-chest tension nearly turned a sold-out arena into a powder keg. The WNBA wasn't trying to silence personalities. It was drawing the line between competitive edge and confrontation. As a result, players had to learn to celebrate smartly, with more subtle swagger. But make no mistake, this rule shift was born from the new era of big voices and even bigger moments. Freedom of movement emphasis, 2018. 2018 marked a turning point in how the WNBA handled physical defense. After years of clutching, grabbing, and body checking, especially off-ball, the league had enough. That summer, it rolled out a new emphasis, freedom of movement. If a player was impeded while cutting, posting, or curling around screens, it was now a foul. Period. This wasn't a rule change as much as an enforcement reset, but its effects were immediate and massive. Guards like Diana Taurasi and Jewel Lloyd flourished, suddenly free to move through sets without being bumped off balance. Shooters gained space. Playmakers had cleaner lanes. The decision was spurred by years of growing frustration. Fans wanted fluid offense. Analysts decried games that became wrestling matches. And with younger stars coming in, like Aja Wilson and Kelsey Plum, who relied on finesse over brute strength, the timing made sense. Coaches had to adapt fast. Defensive schemes changed overnight. No more face guarding with your hands. No more grabbing jerseys on curls. It cleaned up the game and elevated skill over muscle. Freedom of movement wasn't just about pretty basketball, it was about evolution. It let the game breathe, and in doing so, gave rise to a new generation of scorers who could now thrive on skill, angles, and speed. Playoff format changes to protect top seeds, 2022. Before 2022, WNBA playoff formats were chaotic. Top seeds could find themselves playing single-elimination games against streaky lower seeds. Upsets were thrilling, but unfair. Coaches and players, especially veterans like Sylvia Fowles and Breanna Stewart, lobbied hard for change. The result? A restructured playoff format that protected top seeds with full series. Under the old system, teams that grinded out 30-win seasons could be knocked out in 40 minutes. That didn't sit right with players who built legacies over full campaigns. The 2022 overhaul guaranteed best-of-3 first rounds and best-of-5 semifinals and finals, finally aligning with basketball norms. It wasn't just about fairness, it was about longevity. Stars needed a playoff runway, and the league, now on the rise with new media deals and record-breaking viewership, understood that premier players needed primetime exposure. The change gave more breathing room for comebacks, adjustments, and storytelling. It turned playoff matchups into sagas rather than single-night drama. Players embraced it. Teams strategized differently. And for the first time in years, the WNBA postseason felt like a real battleground. The best part? Fans now got to witness stars at their peak, over multiple games, not a single do-or-die outing. It was a rule change for legacy, and it worked. Introduction of the defensive 3-second rule, 2013. In 2013, the WNBA made a shift that subtly but significantly reshaped interior defense, the defensive 3-second rule. It was a quiet addition to the rulebook, mirroring the NBA's approach, but the impact rippled throughout the league. Defenders could no longer plant themselves in the paint like statues. If a player stayed in the lane for more than 3 seconds without actively guarding someone, it was a violation. The league made the move to open up the floor and increase scoring. But it was also a response to the dominance of certain shot blockers and rim protectors. Players like Sylvia Fowles, Tina Charles, and Brittany Griner had turned the paint into no-fly zones. Drives died, cuts collapsed. Guards were hesitant to even try. By forcing defenders to make a choice, stay with your player or rotate decisively, the rule gave slashers and post players a better chance to operate. It particularly benefited hybrid forwards and aggressive guards who thrived off hesitation moves and inside-out footwork. Griner still swatted shots, but she had to pick her moments. Paint bullies couldn't just lurk, and coaches began using motion-heavy offenses to exploit the new spacing. The rule didn't just tweak strategy, it rebalanced power between size and speed. Backcourt reset from 30 to 24 seconds, 2006. Back in the early days, the WNBA's shot clock reset rules mimicked those of international play. When a foul occurred in the backcourt, the team got a fresh 30 seconds. That might seem minor, but it slowed the game to a crawl. Possessions dragged, comebacks took forever, and time management was a slog for fans. In 2006, the league trimmed the reset time to 24 seconds across the board, matching the NBA standard and pushing pace. This wasn't just about speeding things up, it was about embracing modern basketball. The decision had ripple effects. Offensive sets had to be sharper, transition play became more urgent, isolation-heavy offenses had to adjust or die. The change was inspired partly by stars like Cappie Pondexter and Deanna Nolan, whose pace and transition prowess made slow resets feel archaic. It gave high IQ guards more control, it gave defenses less time to reset, and it aligned the WNBA more closely with the faster, more aggressive pro-game fans expected. Most importantly, it made every possession count. No more milking the clock with no purpose, just pure high-stakes basketball every trip down. Extension of the three-point line, 2016. The WNBA's three-point line didn't always match its talent. As players like Maya Moore, Diana Taurasi, and Allie Quigley rained threes from deeper than regulation, the league knew it had to catch up. In 2016, it extended the arc to match FIBA standards, 6.75 meters from the center, up from the previous 6.25. It may not seem like a dramatic leap, but for shooters, it was a seismic shift. Depth perception, footwork, and spacing changed, and for defenses, it became a nightmare. The floor stretched wider, closeouts had to be longer, help defense became riskier. Some argued the league should have gone even further, to NBA range, but this was a necessary middle ground, especially with a new wave of sharpshooters like Kelsey Plum and Jewel Lloyd entering the league. The new arc tested old habits. Veteran shooters had to adjust. Younger players trained deeper from day one. And slowly, the deep three became a weapon, not just a gimmick. It also changed how bigs were used. Stretch forwards became essential. Pick and pop spacing evolved. And what started as a small tweak turned into a cornerstone of the modern WNBA offense. Transition take fouls penalized, 2022. For years, WNBA fast breaks were too often killed by one cynical tactic, the take foul. A player would intentionally foul in transition, usually by grabbing a jersey or reaching in, just to stop the break. It was legal, smart, and incredibly frustrating to watch. No free throws, no fast break, just a boring sideline inbound. But as athletes like Sabrina Ionescu, Kelsey Mitchell, and Kalia Copper brought more pace and flair to the open court, the league finally said enough. In 2022, the WNBA introduced a rule change. Intentional transition fouls without a play on the ball would now result in one free throw plus possession. No more cheap bailout for defenses. The impact was immediate. Fast breaks became electric again. Teams had to think twice before sacrificing a foul just to slow down the game. Speedy guards and transition-heavy teams thrived. It was a change driven by style, and the WNBA's desire to let athletes showcase their full ability. Players like Copper, known for coast-to-coast bursts, suddenly had room to finish, and defenders had to defend or give up a bucket. This rule wasn't just about cleaning up play, it was about protecting the very identity of the modern WNBA, fast, fluid, and filled with highlight reel potential. Freedom of movement emphasis, 2018. By 2018, the WNBA had evolved into a league full of high IQ guards and elite motion offenses. But one thing hadn't kept up: off-ball defense. Players were getting grabbed, bumped, and held constantly, especially stars like Elena Del Don, Skylar Diggins-Smith, and Chelsea Gray. The league had enough. That year, officials began a strong freedom of movement emphasis. It wasn't a new rule per se, but a new enforcement focus. The goal? Eliminate physicality that disrupted cuts, screens, and spacing. For offensive creators, it was a breath of fresh air. No more defenders holding wrists on curls or body checking through screens. It opened up the mid-range and made off-ball shooters far more dangerous. Deladone especially benefited. Her footwork-heavy, screen-reliant game flourished when defenders couldn't hand-fight her every step. Gray's timing as a passer also became deadlier with more space to find cutters. The emphasis also shifted how coaches built rosters. Mobility and recovery speed mattered more than brute strength. Defenders had to move, not muscle. It's one of the reasons the WNBA's offense today is so crisp, because the league recognized that movement is what makes the modern game sing. Revised flopping rules and warnings, 2023. Flopping had become a creeping issue in the WNBA. Subtle embellishments, delayed reactions, head jerks, and wild falls. It wasn't out of control, but it was enough to frustrate fans and muddy the product, especially in high-stakes matchups where momentum turned on a single whistle. In 2023, the league responded. Players caught flopping would now receive a warning, and repeat offenders could be fined. The change wasn't about punishing drama, it was about preserving authenticity. The move came after years of growing frustration with exaggerated charges and phantom contact, especially among guards trying to draw calls on screens. Some even argued that younger players were being influenced by overseas or NBA habits, where flopping had long been an issue. The new rule helped bring clarity back to physical contests. It empowered referees to call out manipulation, and it let tough defenders like Natasha Cloud and Alyssa Thomas do their jobs without constant second-guessing. It also shifted offensive behavior. Players thought twice before throwing themselves backward or overselling contact. The league didn't want to erase gamesmanship, but it wanted to keep it honest. And as playoff intensity increased, the flopping crackdown ensured that the WNBA's hardest battles were decided by grit, not acting chops.